Wow, I'm almost never nervous talking. Well, what I want to do is take a few moments and give a little background about information you wouldn't get reading the book to make this interesting. And the first thing I wanted to just state is I hope you appreciate I chose to have the book signing today instead of yesterday so I didn't overshadow the Harry Potter thing. Strategic design.
You're cuter than Harry Potter.
The men's inquiry started in about 1996, and it built out of my own need and desire to have a place where men can have meaningful conversations about their lives. But the birth of the book started in Alaska. And why it started in Alaska is a man from Alaska found my website online, and he contacted me and he says, I want to know where the nearest men's inquiry is. Well, of course, there was at that time just one. There was no other. And I really wasn't willing to ask him to fly down to Raleigh. So I started, in discussion with him, I started an online men's inquiry that has ongoingly about 150 men from around the world. And I launched the questions through that. After that, some other people started finding the website and asking for assistance in either building their own group or some other form of it or a duplicate of this. This is designed to be a giveaway. That means anyone in the world who wants to create something like this or similar to it is welcome to do it. So I thought I'd pick out a few stories of people who had come to me and asked about it. And one of the stories was a gentleman from Florida, a retired gentleman, contacted me and said, you know, all the women get together here and they chat, but I don't see the guys ever getting together. And there's a group of us that don't play golf. And that group that doesn't play golf doesn't get together at all. I found your website and was looking for resources, and I'd like your help in building such a group here. Well, this gentleman started a group, and he got the guys, and he just talked to them, and they started getting together, and they found a coffee shop type place, and they started having the meetings. And then what occurred is some more men started showing up. Well, the women got suspicious because men don't get together and just talk, you know. This couldn't be happening. A few of the women decided to try to figure out where these guys were really going and what they were up to. And to their shock and disbelief, they found them in that coffee shop, laughing and talking and having a discussion. And they were just moved and touched by what they saw. And he shared the story with me. And as far as I know, he's still going on. Another story that, looking back over the years of stories of people starting things, was a gentleman called me in Canada. And he said, I found your website and I want to do something to help men. And I want to make an effort to give back. So I encouraged him to look out to see what was there. And there was a coffee house designed for men, some type of halfway house for men who had just gotten out of severe crisis in their life. And they had one guy who created a coffee shop meeting, and they gave him permission that he could volunteer and recreate that. So what he did is, we talked about it, and I said, look, make it simple. Get them together, just take one of the questions from the men's inquiry and write it on the whiteboard in there, and then see what happens. So we wrote it on the board. These guys came in, they met, they had coffee, more showed up. He didn't get much feedback because most of the men there had some real social challenges. So it was hard to read them to find out, except he knew the numbers were growing. He called me and said, I'm not sure this is working. I said, well, take the question off the board. If it makes no difference, you'll notice it. So one day he didn't put the question on the board, and 15 minutes into the event, several guys in a cluster came up, sort of looking at their shoes, and they said, where's the question? Where's the question? And he realized that was really important to him. So he put the question up, and it continued. A third story I'm really proud of, and I'm really excited to hear, is Leroy. I want to talk about that. Leroy is very accomplished in his career and a retired gentleman that's now decided to move back to his hometown. I opened the door at 7 o'clock, and Leroy showed up one day at the men's inquiry, and he said, I came from Laurinburg, North Carolina. I want to study what you're doing, and I'd really like to build a men's group in Laurinburg to start with the first African-American men's group in Laurinburg. And I said, did you say Laurinburg, North Carolina? He said, yes. Well, I went to college there, and it's a 100-mile drive one way. So Leroy drove up on a regular basis. I think it was almost 6 months, wasn't it? And then put his own notes together. And the exciting thing is he went back to the community to really listen to what they wanted, to really understand what it was. And he realized some of the things he thought. And I got to meet some of the great guys, the men of MELO, what the acronym is?
Men enhancing the lives of others.
Men enhancing the lives of others, MELO. And I had a wonderful few hours meeting with them. They're all great guys working and doing, they've done some terrific community service work in Laurinburg. And he just was on a radio show in Chapel Hill talking about it. Out of these requests around the country, I thought it'd be great to build a to-do book of how to build this, how to replicate it. Well, I started to do that, and it was a list of instructions on what to do, and I was bored with it. So I thought, well, I'd really like to capture the voice and words of the men through the 10 years, but that was all done in confidentiality, and it was not possible to quote them because one of the core agreements is what's said here stays here, to build trust in the group. So I started writing my own story, and after quite a few pages of my own story of how it benefited me, guess what? I got bored again. So I thought, well, why don't I put out some feelers on the website and post some things on discussion boards and see if I can get men who would volunteer to help out with a book and answer these questions that had been developed organically over the 10 years of the men's inquiry. I got a few and I got excited. I then didn't know how hard the task will be. By the time I got enough to work, I had contacted over 1,000 men to get about 150 who agreed to answer the questions in the book. And so to do this took a pretty big count and a lot of conversations with these guys to trust me enough that I would protect their confidentiality. I would change data so it would not be obvious it was them, and then I would put it together in the book. So out of that 1,000 men, I got about 150 or more that contributed to it. Then I had an editing nightmare ahead of myself. Well, about that time, I had gotten in a heated discussion with a guy on the men's inquiry. In fact, some might call it an argument, but I was having a good time, and I found out he was too. And we found out that we lived nearby. So we agreed to meet for lunch at a Mexican restaurant and started to sit down and talk. And that was John Sharp. And after we talked, I said, well, the challenge is getting this all edited because this is a community service. And I tried a few for-paid editors, not that there aren't great ones, but this was such a job of keeping the voice of each one of these men, it hadn't worked. John said, I'll do it. Well, I thought, well, I'll trade out in coaching with you. So we started meeting, and I attempted to trade out in coaching. And all he wanted to do was help with the book. And it took me a while to figure out when he said, I'll do it. That meant I will give my time generously to this cause because I see value in it. And he donated just countless number of hours in getting it so that we kept the voice of the man, but it was readable. Because some of these were emails where it's kind of like they just stream of consciousness wrote it down, and they might leave a word out, but we didn't want to change it so much that you couldn't still hear their voice. So that was the next big challenge that occurred. After that, we got it, worked on it, and we had terrific meals, chatting with each other. He's also, I mentioned, an Anglican priest, so the discussions about theology is exciting to me as the editing. The next challenge, which I hadn't mentioned, is that I also have dyslexia, which means I use text-to-speech to be able to read. And that, of course, now that we have we had about 600 to 700 pages of document put together. Reading and reviewing that was a challenge in itself. And for that, I used a text-to-speech program that I named Marilyn to actually read this information. I brought Marilyn around over to talk. Let's see if we can hear her.
Hello, my name is Marilyn. I had Martin's text-to-speech program and I made it possible for him to review his own book. It is great to be out of the computer for a while and say a few words to you today. No, I am a program, but I am also a woman's voice. And as I repeated the text, I learned so much about men that I did not know. It was fascinating. I can't tell you. Don't let that stop you. I hope you enjoy the book as much as I do. In case you wonder about me and his beautiful wife Barbara, I enjoy being Martin's text-to-speech assistant when I was around before Barbara, and know this book would not be possible without her love and support. Thanks for letting me talk with you today, Marilyn.
So anyway, clap for that. I thought I'd bring Marilyn along to let you hear it. So the point in that is, if any of you say, well, I'd like to write, but I'm not a writer, I'd like you to just give that belief up, start writing. After we got it all together, the toughest thing was I had more material than can fit in a 6x9 book, because I didn't realize 600 pages in Word was like 1,000 pages in a book. And sorry, but no matter how much you might like me, you probably wouldn't get through the book. First, I had to cut back on what was said, and then also cut back literally on chapters. And I decided to divide the chapters. And how I chose to cut it is I listened to the voices and was listening to a voice I had heard from a man, either in the men's inquiry or working with the men's center in some way. If it was like, yes, I've heard that before. That's it. That's the voice. That's a perspective I heard. Any of the things I had heard that seemed to echo something I might have heard in confidentiality by someone else, I grabbed that, marked it as a keeper in the book. Then I cut everything that wasn't exactly that out. Then when it came to the chapter, which was 27 chapters, if you notice the book doesn't have 27 chapters, I sat down and I asked, what are the absolute core issues that are important for a man to look at in his life first? And if it didn't meet that criteria, it got cut. So absolute criteria. And you'll notice in the book, it does not have relationships with a partner. Now you might say, why is that not in it? Because when I looked through this book, I decided that if a man has not addressed issues like resolving issues of what it means to be a man, understanding what your mission and purpose in life is, learning to let people contribute to you and mentor, resolving issues with your father and mother, being able to deal with emotional pain in your life, being able to deal with anger in your life, and being able to grieve when needed, those to me are fundamental to make a life partner work. And so that's why that's not in here yet. Because when I just sat there and asked, what is the core, and kept cutting the other out, that's what I got here in this book. The last thing I want to bring up is there's several other products coming out, and that is already recorded and only 8 hours away of completion and editing is the CD. This CD is already out. This is a live recording of the men's inquiry, and the title is, What Does It Mean to Be a Man of Your Word? There's a second CD coming out on what does it mean to be a good father. Then there's a live recording of the women's inquiry. Anyway, that's on enhancing and maintaining self-confidence. There's also a CD interview with a professional interview on my model of maturing males. And along with that, there will be a book out called Just the Questions which is the questions from this book plus the extra ones put into a small 5x7 book. That's the core of everything. I want to take a moment to thank my wife, Barbara. See back there?
Hey.
Hey.
Guys, I put food too.
Thanks, yeah, that put the food together. My father, who drove down from D.C. today.
All right.
All the men that are here, including Rob Harris, who's starting a sort of a faith-based version of the Men's Inquiry in the Triangle area. Janet Bauer, that helps with the Women's Inquirer. Amy Skye and Sid Harrell and Barton and Leroy and Dick DeWitt, who helped out making it all happen. Thanks. So I thought I'd see if you had one or two questions, and then we'll have a lot of fun. Yes?
Martin, what's the fundamental difference between us and them? Men and women.
Oh, man.
Drink some water.
Man, you don't want to go there.
Put the black in there. Notice I just said the difference.
So, did you notice that I needed to pause to give that answer? That's part of the answer. It's literally the way we operate in the world, that it seems to affect us differently, and our communication system can be quite different. And the greatest value is, there's value in honoring and respecting the differences instead of seeing them as a negative. Both the wonderful aspects that women bring to the marketplace and the world and relationships, as well as men. And the point I want to add on to that is, if we don't do that in this world, then when a little boy looks at what does it mean to be a man, and we are not modeling having healthy relationships with each other as men, or honoring what it means to be an adult man for that little boy, then he will have no model of who to be, and a male will usually pick a negative role model over none at all. Another question. Yes?
Something tells me that this is not a book where you start on page 1 and go up to the last page.
Yeah,
Like
yeah,
Harry Potter.
that's right. That's right.
How would you suggest approaching
Yeah, the way I suggest
someone
it
with
is,
no background?
absolutely. It says reading the book up to through chapter 4. Actually read that. And then literally jump around. It is in a sequence with intentionality, but you can just pick any one and open it, read it. This is something that has multiple uses. It can be used to just read the questions and think about them. You can read the answers or my comments after the questions anywhere. So that's how I use it. Yep. Anyone else?
Well, I wonder if you don't want to point out the fact that actually one of the things the book does so thoroughly is it gives a different version of men and their impressions of a particular issue. In other words, you get a range of responses of what how each individual man is impacted.
That's right. This is a book about showing perspectives of real people. This is not some PhD analyzing men and giving you statistical data. This is stuff that I can assure you took a lot of courage on my part to write about myself, as well as each one of these men who demonstrated emotional courage in this book by sharing themselves. So, another question. Yep.
Was there any element through your process that you found surprising? Wow, I would never have anticipated that.
I somehow didn't guess how much work it would be to get men to contribute to the book, because I had already had a lot of good male friends at that time that would help. But when you try to get enough to get that spectrum, because it was like, oh, something's missing here. I wanted as many of the voices of men as I had heard. So that was one of the biggest things. Yes?
Talk to us about the diverse background of men, Black, white, Hispanic.
Well, one of the pieces with diverse is, if I knew them, I initiated seeking diversity. But because I posted a lot on the internet, I didn't often know their race and I didn't ask.
I don't think I think it would be very, very difficult to tell the race and the
Yeah, the demographics.
demographics.
No, but if I knew the man,
Yeah.
you know, a friend that I had, that was it. But I really let it just come in. And once I said I didn't want their opinions, I didn't want them to tell me how to do something, I didn't want their political views, I wanted just them sharing themselves, that kind of selected out a lot of people very quickly. And some of them did. I got these huge essays and political views about masculinity in the world that unfortunately did not. I couldn't use.
Left on the
They left on the cutting board. Yeah.
And I think you told me that excluded most of the ministries.
well, I want to say something about that. I want to say I have gotten an awful lot of calls from men in Bible studies throughout the world who came to me because they went to it to build fellowship, and what they got is a regurgitating of Bible quotes. And I coached them, many of them, especially sometimes with John's help, because he's Anglican priest, in how to start sharing themselves, and if the minister couldn't handle it, find another church. Because if they can't be real with other men, that is not what it's about. So that was, glad you brought that up. Yeah.
I just want to continue with Leroy's point. I think a lot of what you've discovered would also exclude the experience of many therapists. Okay, in other words, I'm reading from page 380 where Leroy says, bad therapy encouraged me to move from no feelings to feelings on my sleeves, which was not much better. And he describes, it took a lot of work in men's groups to be okay with the feelings I have, but not always sharing them with everyone, just having them. Also finding a therapist who understood men's work helped. And just because they are a male therapist does not mean they are good at this.
Yes. One of the things I've learned that I want to talk about related to therapy, because I have gone through depression in my life and got therapy that was very effective, and I probably wouldn't be here without that, as well as therapy that was quite ineffective at times. One of the pieces on that is it's being discovered as a lot of the traditional models of therapy did not take into account the difference between men and women, and how we grieve differently, how we respond to things differently. The simple thing is how a man works through a problem. I'll give a great story from a therapist. He said a man lost his wife, and he said, what are you going to do to deal with this? And the man said, I know, I'll be back. And he came back to the therapy, and he had gotten a block of wood and put it on a bench. And each day he carved a little bit away from the wood until all that was left is a perfect image of his wife that had passed away.
That's great.
You know? Yeah. And that was the way he grieved. So it's honoring that there's a different way that things occur. And allowing for the beauty of the difference. Yes. Another question? Yeah.
When you read that article, was that an article written under the caption of Leroy?
I think it says Leroy, the one and only, and it's on in the chapter that says, if you stop crying or grieving, can you remember when, what happened, and what decision you made about that event that happened? And then it quotes several people, including you, and I just...
Well, it's actually not him, if you want to know.
It's not you.
No, it's not him.
Oh, it's another...
No, I want to state, these are, first of all, these are all pseudonames.
Yeah.
Oh,
no, what's the
I'm sorry about that.
pseudonyms?
It was a great copy, though, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yeah, it was well done.
He could have thought, he probably would have said something wiser, but we
had a whole list.
Yes, yeah.
And we went down this list, and there were, 500 names for it?
Oh, we had a lot of names, and then we started running out, and I was starting to pull out dead rock stars and all kinds of stuff. Bingo's in there. I was really having a problem coming up with simple men's names.
But you maintained the code.
Yes, that's right.
The key.
I immediately, once the guy came in, I started putting all this stuff under it and changed his name to another name and then locked it in an Excel worksheet. So when I edited, I didn't want to know who it was,
Gotcha.
you see? And that was important because I didn't want to be biased by it when it occurred.
That's good.
Any other questions with me? Yep.
What kind of differences do you find between straight and gay men?
Well, that's a good question. First of all, that wasn't a question, are you straight, are you gay, or anything like that. The question did not come up. And the truth is, it did not come up in the men's inquiry. We would have addressed it. But if you look at the core issues of men, in my experience, they even go before that. You know, like your relationship with your father and so forth. And I really didn't filter for it or do anything. It was just a man talking about his life, which is what it was. So it was just like the idea of attempting to notice the race or anything else. There was no attempt to look at it. The attempt was to listen to men for what they had to say in first person personal.
Occasionally they would identify their sexual orientation.
Yeah.
But we don't think we did anything with that. I think we left it there because it turns out, it seems to me, that there's very little difference in the way they feel. In other words, that the sexual orientation doesn't alter the core man himself.
Yeah, that's right. Anything else?
Mark, do you have a fundamental question with this book when you're done reading it that you want to have answered?
You mean me or other
Just
people?
the book itself.
Well, the core of all of this is the entire reason for putting this together is that I realized is my commitment to society working. And I realized one of the things that happened in my years growing up in DC and being involved with some great work to increase rights for women, get more opportunities for women. So one of the pieces is we may have overlooked some core things with men along this journey. And if we do that, the cost is going to be negative to men and women in our society. In fact, it's going to be tremendously big. The vision I see is if men seem to need more socialization for maturing than women. And if we don't get that, we either lash out or we kind of become a very kind man without the backbone to do what we need to do in our lives. So I want to talk, that's part of my CD of that is if men don't do some of this work, they either become a brittle man that has to dominate it and control his environment to create a synthetic core in himself, or he becomes a man that is absorbed in his feelings, not having his feelings, absorbed in his feelings where he's not able to do what he wants in his life. So there seems to be about two main areas men go to. That's why I'm also an advocate of the Mankind Project New Warrior training, because it is a tool, a socialization tool to help men in the maturing process. And I say, for most of us, if it doesn't happen, it doesn't happen. It just doesn't. There have been 83-year-old men. In fact, in the Rites of Passage is a story of a 79-year-old man who asked me to work with him on what it means to be a man as a coach. And it's in there. It just doesn't happen. And the cost is tremendous. Because when a man's secure in himself, he doesn't have to dominate control. He loves to have powerful, beautiful women in his life. He loves for them to succeed. He wants everything to work in society, and he wants to give back to society. So
because he isn't threatened.
Right, he isn't threatened by it. Right, if you've got a solid core in here, then whatever you say out here is not going to affect it. And in the history of man, it looks like we need quite a bit of social work and interaction with each other to develop that maturing. Anything else? Well, thanks, folks. Have a great time. It's great to have you all here, and I'm happy to sign any books you want.